under the same roof, we share the love. Embracing the differences like hand in glove. Spreading peace and joy, it's a beautiful sight. Together we shine in each other's light. And how do we stand in love's pure might? Watching the world share in love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony painting the night. Tonight we stand in love's pure might.
Well, good evening, everyone. Thank you for tuning in and watching the world. We have quite the show in store tonight as we talk about various subjects that are very appealing, very important today, especially with the media. We also have with us Candace Kelley, who's going to help us understand these various subjects from the legal standpoint, as she is a law professor. This week, we've been covering Luigi Mangione from the courthouse. It's been very cold out there. Today was the only day off during the week, but tomorrow court resumes early in the morning at 9:30. So let's bring on Candace Kelley, everybody.
Hey, Mel, how are you doing today?
Quite well. How are you?
I am doing well. I mean, I know you've been out there a lot in the cold. You were telling me, though, that it wasn't really that busy in terms of how thick the line was compared to some of your other trials, right?
Yeah, it went from being maybe 50 people to 10 on Tuesday.
Yeah. What do you think that was about?
I think a lot of people have to get back to work and things of that. So a lot of people are from Florida, New Orleans, quite a few different places. So the work is calling.
Yeah, I remember when I was in court and I spoke to some of the women. I said, how long? And they were mostly women. There were a couple of men, but I said, how long do you think you're going to be here? And but mostly, how can you be here? Because they were definitely of the age as to whether or not they were in college or whether they were working. But they just said, the girl sitting next to me said, well, as long as my work will allow me to be here, as long as many days I can take off. So there are a lot of sacrifices being made by a lot of people to go see this trial. And I will say specifically to go see this young man. That's really what it comes down to go see this young man.
Absolutely. I think a couple people there probably are playing hooky from work because
Yes.
whenever the photographers take the Luigi Mangione,
Yeah.
I see
Yeah.
some people ducking down, trying to hide from the camera. So I don't know what
Yeah.
that's about. Yeah.
Yeah, and that's one thing I was reminded of when I went to court was that's right. This is a state court, so that's why we've seen photos and him in his plaid shirt or his green sweater. And if you are sitting in a certain position, you will be seen in the long shot of the camera in the back as they gather, the attorneys and Luigi. So if you're off work, you don't want to be in that shot.
Definitely. I have quite a few courtroom photos going on, so I kind of like it.
Oh yeah, yeah. You see yourself sometimes in those photos.
Oh, yeah,
So,
deliberately.
okay,
I make
so
sure
so what is the position? Where do you have to be inside of the courtroom to kind of be positioned in those photos that are going across the world?
in the middle by the aisle or to the far right or far left.
Okay, all right. Now we got
Yeah.
the word. We got the word on how to do it. That is
Yeah.
something else.
Everybody's
Yeah.
going to be vying for those seats now, right?
Yeah.
A good deal. So, we talked previously about all the things that are happening with Donald Trump this week. What do you
Yeah.
think? What's going on with these student loans?
Well, let me first say this that there are about 42 million Americans that have student loans. So we're talking about a lot of people, a very big voting block in terms of folks who can say yay or nay. I want somebody in the midterms or I want somebody during the next presidency. This is a big single kind of issue vote. I know even I had student loans. They were forgiven actually because I teach for the state. And let me tell you, that was like a hallelujah day. I have copies of the zero balance because it is a big deal when you have a law school loan where you're borrowing tens of thousands of dollars and there's been interest. Your loan could be, the right. So we are talking about now a reversal of some of these student loan and forgiveness programs that are out there. It was specifically the SAVE program. It's something that Joe Biden had fought for, but the Supreme Court said no. So he did this workaround, according to the Republicans, to work around the decision of the Supreme Court to say, no, this is not within your power to have this type of a program. And so he created the SAVE program. So a lot of these programs allow the loan to be delayed, have low interest rates. And so all of that, according to the reports and according to what the president wants, and according to the Department of Education, is going to change. And people will soon have to pay back their loans in full or actually enroll in one of the other programs that's not as good as this SAVE program. So we're going to be dealing with a lot of people who are facing lots of big payments that will all of a sudden come to them that they have to pay. So this is a big deal, especially when we are talking about the economy. As many people saw, President Trump made a lot of announcements about this robust economy that we are in. But when you look at the index, we see the cost of meat, you see the cost of bread, you see the cost of eggs have gone down a little bit. But if you look at the cost of meat, it is up. So with those things in mind, everyone is talking about how their pockets are being hit. And that's why these loans are particularly important. This entire SAVE program has actually been blocked since February, where in one of the circuit courts, the judges decided with the Republican states that argued that Joe Biden once again lacked the authority to even establish this type of student loan relief program.
Okay, today we watched at around lunchtime the whole rally with Donald Trump in Pennsylvania. And he's saying that he is the best president ever based on the numbers. He has all the facts together and he's done things that Joe Biden could only have dreamed of.
Yeah, so we are used, every politician has to do a certain bit of massaging to their record, right? But as I said, I think that when people think about what's going on, if you hear somebody saying that the economy is great, that I'm the best, that I'm doing all I can for everyone, but it's falling on deaf ears because people are paying more for everything from heat. Talk to your people about how much. I don't know about your heating bill, but my heating bill has gone up tremendously. I had to look back and do like a forensic accounting to figure out where did this money go over the past year. And it was still, it was the same amount. I started to do comparisons. So that being said, I mean, you're going to have presidents that are going to rah-rah themselves all the way into the end of their presidency. We know that he is a person who he does this thing, and it's been proven in studies that it is kind of effective. If you say something over and over enough, well, you begin to believe it, and then also people on the outside they tend to believe it. And so I think what he's been doing is he's been following the beck and call of what's being talked about in the White House, going out and staying on message and making sure that you have your own messaging no matter what is out there. So that's what we see the president doing. Ask the people in the streets, you'll actually get a different story. And excuse me as I get something out of my eye. But yes, so that's what we're seeing. We're seeing President Trump creating a narrative, continuing a narrative, if you will.
Yeah, a lot of people are talking about his health care. Do you think that there's something to it, or it's just the way of the media?
You mean his particular health and how he is, the MRI and how he's feeling?
Correct.
Yeah, this is one of those things where there are a lot of eyes on the physical symptoms, from the gait of his walk to the badge that's often on his hand. You have band-aids that cover up what seems to be a bruise. And so with that in mind, I think that the speculation is worth taking into consideration. If anybody who is that age is not going to have a perfect body. And so I think that when it comes to the public should know how a president is faring. There's more than speculation. Some people say plain evidence, the swelling in his legs, the drooping of his mouth. They're doing the whole date and in terms of the timeline of when he went to have his MRI and connecting that with the drooping of his mouth. What we want to know fully how the president is doing. But here's what we also know, Mel. We know that any positioning of the president looking weak is going to make the president look weak, not just America and to his constituents, but people around the world. And this is something that we as a country, we want to make sure that we put the best foot forward. And that's why they are doing this. Meanwhile, people like me, I definitely would want to know what is going on with that MRI. This is the guy who said, yeah, I don't know what they checked in the MRI. When do you go into an MRI and you don't know what they are checking? You just don't go into some big machine, all right, and go through for 20 minutes and have all these lights and buttons pushed around you, and you don't ask any questions. So a lot of it did not make sense. It was not adding up that he would say, I don't know what's going on. It doesn't make any sense.
He was actually hinting toward running for president again, maybe lightheartedly, but he was.
Yeah. Listen, a lot of things he says in terms of running for the president is not that lighthearted. And we know when President Trump says something, we got to go back to Project 25. During his first 4 years, he was really trying to pull it together. Then what happened? Project 25 got into play. And then we saw a lot of things happening very, very quickly. Let's be real. A lot of things that he has put into place have been happening because he had a plan. He also has a plan to run for president. Now, whether that's real or whether that's just fodder, we don't know. But if he wants to, this is someone who will go above and beyond the limit to change whatever is on the books in order for him to do so. So this is something that people are looking at quite a bit. So Mel, I am still going to be talking, but there is something in my eye, folks. This is just live TV. This is just live TV. And I do not want to be picking through my eye, but I don't know if it's a lash or something that is in my eye. All right, let's keep going. So we know that is part of the president's plan if he believes in it, and if he puts his mind to it. We know that could be a possibility. How exactly? He'd have to change laws on the books, right? Because presidents can only be in office for 2 terms. So we will see how that goes. Very, very difficult process. When we look at everything that's going on right now in terms of his support, in terms of his numbers, depending upon which numbers you look at, right, of course, we know that there may not be that much support for him. All right, look at Marjorie Taylor Greene. What is she saying has been going on behind the scenes with the Republicans? She's been saying that the president, they're making fun of him, that they don't believe in him. Even she is coming, just full frontal and saying everything that she really believes about him. I'm not sure how much strength he has behind him in terms of the Republican Party, because he would need that support in order for him to run again.
Were you shocked to see that she pulled away from the president?
Little by little, I saw it happening, but at the end of the day, I was shocked. Listen, this is someone who has been a staunch supporter, echoing every single thing that he said. I think I find it very interesting that her main breakaway was these Epstein files. So shocked. I mean, this is someone who she knew once she stopped giving support to President Trump, that her career in politics was basically over. Why? Because he was going to Truth Social it, and he was going to call her the dumbest person ever, which he has, and things of that nature. She knew that her political career would go down. So I was very shocked that she said to herself, she waited and said, yes, I will give up my political career in order for this to happen. In the name of these women who I'm standing outside with in Washington, D.C., I am going to support them and be there for them. And I'm actually going to choose them, women, over Donald Trump, right? Donald Trump, remember when he called someone piggy just about within the past 10 days? Just called them piggy. This is how he regards women. That's all they are. They're piggies. They're tools. They're nothing. They're lower than men. And that's exactly how we saw him treating Marjorie Taylor Greene. Here's one thing. We knew that she saw it coming. She could not have known that she was going to pull away from Donald Trump and there be no repercussion. She knew that. So I'm very surprised that she took the chance to hang up her political career. My guess, a book, right? My guess, maybe be a pundit on some show. I think a lot of people would be lining up for Marjorie Taylor Greene, and she's lining up what her career will look like, because in the world of politics, unless it's on some local level, I don't think that there is one.
Somalis for Trump was a really big thing. Well, now he calls them garbage.
Yeah, now he calls them garbage. And this has more to do with just him as a person, him as a leader, him as a man who, when they actually are interacting with people that voted for them, either he's forgetting about the vote or he doesn't understand what it means to play to your constituents and have some type of humanity when dealing with people. That's not necessarily a presidential thing or a leadership thing. That's just a who he is at the core and his moral compass thing. And so that moral compass in terms of how he treats people in general is way off. That's not how you get the best response from people. And that certainly isn't how you are a leader of the United States, right? That the world is looking to should just treat people on an everyday basis. That's not someone that you would want to, that I would want to sit down and break bread with. Why? He has so much up his sleeve and so much venom for people, and you never know when it's going to come. You never know whether it's kind of like Mandani, right? All of this fear in terms of their interaction because he had spoken such terrible things about him. But then when he came into his office, what did he do? It was a love fest. So you just never know. And that unpredictability is something also that inside of any dynamic is just not good, right? Even inside of a family dynamic, if there's unpredictability in terms of the way that your father acts when he walks home, is he going to be mad? Is he going to be drunk? Is he going to be violent? That unpredictability is just unacceptable in terms of kind of the natural way that we interact with each other. Not to be, a therapist about it, but it just isn't the way that you treat people. It just isn't the way.
So the big topic is this whole rumor about Netflix and Paramount. What could you tell us about it?
Mel, this is one of those things that touches so many chords. For people who are out there and they are in the Netflix Tadum world, what we're talking about is Netflix's original plan to buy Warner Brothers. All right. That plan didn't include all of Warner Brothers tiers. For example, CNN was not included in it. HBO certainly was. But what happened was that Paramount said, you know what? I know you guys have been planning this, and I know that this is something that's a huge deal when we talk about power, but we are actually going to have and do what they call a hostile takeover. And I just wanted to go over some numbers in terms of this hostile takeover, because what we're talking about is Warner Brothers had an assets and stock that was worth or that Netflix was going to buy for $27.75 per share. The hostile takeover, meaning that you have a company that comes into play and says, you know what? I'm going to offer more for Warner Brothers. That's number one. Number two, I'm going to go directly to the shareholders and give them more than this $27.75. We're going to give them $30 per share in that a tender offer, meaning that they officially offered the money and officially offered it to shareholders at a premium price above the current market. Now, what they also want to do is take down the board, right? Because the board was on its way to approving and approved a merger with Netflix. So what they want to get rid of the board and dealing directly with the shareholders. And that is what a hostile takeover is. We're offering you more money. We're coming in. We're not even dealing with the board of directors that normally makes the decision. We're going right to the shareholders. Now, what makes this very interesting is that people are now starting to look out. What's the behind the scenes reason why Donald Trump is so involved in this particular takeover, whether it be a hostile takeover or whether it be the original offering by Netflix? Some people are saying it is because Jared Kushner is behind, as well as many other people from Abu Dhabi, for example, and places abroad. But Jared Kushner's company is behind funding this particular hostile takeover, this in order to buy Warner for $108 billion. So is there some interest? Well, it becomes very sticky. Trump said, look, I haven't had any conversations with my son-in-law, but it does it does not avoid the appearance of impropriety, as they say in the law. it really looks like there is more to it. And there's an aggressive approval process, not only by the Department of Justice, by the FCC, by the FTC, right? So the Federal Communications Commission, the Federal Trade Commission, in the name of making sure that does not violate some type of antitrust rules. In America, we want to have what is called, ultra competitiveness with each other. Because when we compete with each other and open up the market, then we become a better place because more people can drive the price in certain ways as opposed to maybe one or two companies. But Mel, there's also a creative issue here, and that is that the fewer people in power that you have that are buying these particular media outlets, well, that's fewer people that are making decisions artistically about what you're actually seeing on HBO. Now, if we take a look at the hostile takeover, that $108 billion offer by Paramount actually includes the purchase of CNN. Remember, CNN is not included in the deal if Netflix was to buy it. They were going to leave CNN on the table. We know that CNN is a liberal station. Now we have to start connecting the dots. We also know that Donald Trump does not like CNN. So what is going to happen to CNN? What is going to happen to some of the factions that, maybe just theoretically Trump might have a say in? Typically and historically, presidents do not have involvements in these types of takeovers. So it's very interesting that heads of both companies, Netflix and Paramount, have sat down with the president. He says he's got no stakes in it, but if you really look in the small print, you're going to see some things that will probably come up during the process and questioning as to whether or not this violates antitrust laws.
Let me ask you a question. The president said he had basically nothing to do with Letitia James or James Comey's cases. Did you believe it?
Well, he definitely had something to do because he hired an attorney who her arena was the field of insurance in order to do very important work that she had never done before in her life. And as a result, those particular indictments were dropped. So, you can't get hired, especially on that type of level, without experience. Not only does that embarrass the person who's in there, but the work doesn't get done. You have to hire someone who's experienced, or else you end up just like this. So there is no way. And remember, there were many people who were like, I'm not signing those indictments. This doesn't make any sense. But he found the one person who did, handpicked her, put her in the position, and she was the only one that signed that indictment. Would have been very different if there were other people that signed the indictment against both of those individuals that you listed, but there weren't. So it all fell on her. As a result, this is where we are. So of course, I believe that he handpicked this woman, and for a reason, because she was going to do and did what he wanted to do, and it did not work out.
Every day I hear from people in the chat saying this is the best president of our lifetime. Do you think these people are delusional? Why is it that they think the president is doing such a great job and other people come on and say, no, he's terrible?
Well, it depends upon who you are. It depends upon how you're living. A lot of Trump's base are people who may not have a lot of money, but they believe in the American dream and they believe what he represents. And so that is very, very attractive. They are attracted to his power. They're attracted to the respect that people do give him. Now, let's go back. I mean, I watch plenty of shows, Home Alone to Sex and the City to Saturday Night Live, where Donald Trump, back in his heyday cultural times where people were accepting him in terms of just high cultural currency, he was making appearance on the shows. A lot of rap videos. Come on, Mel, remember, right?
Oh, yeah.
So
Definitely.
with that in mind, you also have this faction of people that, again, from decades ago to now, still have that view of Trump. He represents the American dream. What's crazy about it, though, is that those people who may be on the lower end of the totem pole in terms of how much they make, how they're respected, no health care, sickness in their families, maybe on opioids, living in the Appalachian Mountains, a lot of them don't see that there's anything the matter with Trump. I think, again, it's one of those things where they've bought into the idea that this man came from nothing, which we know is not true. Even he would say that, and went up and became president of the United States. They like that narrative, and they like the narrative that he gives. Then there are other people who just can kind of see clearly through what he is feeding people, and it doesn't taste good. So that's why you have two different factions. We all come to the table with two different sets of luggage or baggage, if you will, to the table to try to figure out where we fit inside of America. And his narrative is very appealing to the base that is nowhere in his social circle and nowhere within making, 1/100th of the salary that he makes. So it's just a matter of who we are and how we perceive ourselves in the context and in the fabric of America.
It is fair to say that he's built the biggest brand with his name that we'll probably see in a very long time.
So in terms of his hotels, in terms of his meat, in terms of his schools, in terms of his other real estate, there was a time where people believed that he was making all of this happen in a way that was fair and equitable and above board. What we have seen has been otherwise, lying on paperwork, and presenting himself to be someone that he is not. And all of that got found out. That's why Letitia James went after him in terms of how he assessed his home and increased it when necessary and decreased it when necessary in terms of paying taxes. So, does he have a brand that everybody will remember? They will. Will it be because it's a good brand, or will it be kind of a more notorious remembering? It might be B, Mel, because these are brands that have failed. The hundreds of lawsuits against him kind of really tell the story. And when you are doing business with someone, yeah, there's going to be a typical lawsuit if you're a big billionaire, right? But when we're talking about hundreds, kind of like Sean Combs, yeah, somebody might file a sexual assault suit, or they might file a case against, the typical, actor or musician. But when you get into the hundreds, then that's a problem. And your brand is definitely diminished and tarnished. You have to work against that. So I think his brand will be remembered, but not as the brand that we know it. A lot of his places have been closing too. And in terms of his monies too, it's just not the way that it used to be. So I think that his brand is tarnished.
I sat in Donald Trump's trial here in New York City in the same courtroom that we're attending for Luigi Mangione the last 2 weeks, right? He
Uh-huh.
received 34 felonies. A lot of people say, oh, it was just all a hoax. What do you think?
Yeah, it's not it's only a hoax in your mind until you start seeing the evidence. And you always, if you're a defendant, that's the position that you have to take. It's a hoax, innocent till proven guilty, and let's go ahead and give him that. Let's give all of the defendants that, right? That's why we have the Sixth Amendment, a right to a speedy and fair trial, a right to face your accuser. You don't have to get on the stand if you don't want to, but that shouldn't be held against you. We have these laws and amendments in place for the defendant, so that actually makes sense. For him to call it a hoax, not so much. There was real evidence, right? How long was that trial that you sat in with Trump?
Ooh, I think it was roughly maybe 6 weeks or so.
All right. So they were showing something, right? They were showing something on the screen, something on the pad. They were showing something, they were showing evidence and making their case. So there was no hoax involved. It was
Yeah, I
just
was
a
there.
matter. Yeah.
I,
What's that?
I heard it. I heard it for myself. I was there, but people say, "Oh no, that's just a fake trial."
Yeah, yeah. I'm not even sure what I know what a fake trial is. You have real people, real witnesses, real evidence. Again, it's really part of the narrative. As much as people do not like Trump, you have to give him a little. I'm gonna give him a little credit. This man knows how to make the media switch into his favor, put people down, and say something enough where people start taking a look at it. Listen, when he questioned PBS and how they set up the video of him at the January 6th rally, it was something that he questioned. He brought it up enough, and guess what? He was right. The way that PBS edited him made him look like he was saying one thing that he wasn't. So I'm just going to say he isn't always wrong. How about that? But he definitely has a pattern of that, just saying opposite of what everybody says until somebody starts listening, then you start questioning. And as journalists, here's where it becomes kind of frayed. As journalists, if he says that something is a hoax, well, then journalists, especially on Fox, will cover that he said it was a hoax and then becomes news in the mainstream, and then people believe it's a hoax. It's this huge circle of very weird media that we are in terms of creating the narrative. And that's just the world that we're in right now. You and I were talking today about a vlogger or an influencer who I wrote you and I said, that's not even the truth. And you were like, do you think that person cares? No, they don't, because many times people in the news, many times people, even in legacy media, we know when we turn on CNN versus Fox, the type of news that we're going to hear, and we create a narrative that makes us feel good. So we just have to be very good consumers of the news to figure out what's going on, because everybody has one of these. And everybody can say, based upon the First Amendment, what they want to say, unless they defame someone or something of that nature. But it is the wild, wild west out here. And so that's why these narratives are easy to create. And that includes Trump. That includes anybody. That includes anybody.
Okay, Daltonic says Trump is the castor oil, tastes bad going down, but it cleans out the system.
But it cleans out the system. Wow. Listen, some of the things that he has done, people have said, yes, rah, rah, let's go. We're going to hire Elon Musk and we're going to clean out the government and we're going to do all that. I can understand. I can see how people would be frustrated with the way things have been done, and they're looking at something new. But that is not how you do business. That's just not how you do business. And now you can do business in terms of going in and cleaning out the government, but the repercussions are bigger. It's not that people don't want some of the same things that Trump wants. For him, it's always the how. It's always the how. It's always this kind of unnecessary, often uncouthness. And I believe in the First Amendment. I believe actually that he should be able to say what he wants to say. But that's not to say that there aren't going to be some repercussions, right? You can't say to someone, just we just want him to shut up. That's not how the law works. You can't tell somebody that they don't have the right to say what they're going to say. But the repercussions, we all have a right to go in and correct that. And the corrective process is often where we find with Donald Trump.
Wow. And speaking of Netflix, what do you think about this whole deal with Sean Diddy Combs and the documentary?
So, this documentary, we just have to take a pause, a break about this documentary. I mean, so let me repeat something that I've said earlier tonight, but it was about Trump and him, just who he was at the core as a human being. I will say that that documentary, it not only spelled out maybe and connected a lot of dots in terms of legally, in terms of his case, in terms of old cases, whether it was Biggie, Tupac. They basically said, based in this documentary, that he was responsible for calling the shots in Tupac's murder. But that being said, I think what they did, and tell me if you agree with me or not, what they did in this documentary was paint him as a terrible human being to his core, right? And that again comes with the narrative, because this video that Sean Combs is going to sue partially for, and has, is going to, fully make it, fully make the public aware soon that he's going to sue them for defamation. He's now talking about the fact, or the alleged fact, that the recordings that people had not seen, he did not give permission to. And that's I think what's very crucial here, that it wasn't just about these recordings that he's fighting over. The bigger thing is that he can't fight it, was that this really make him look like someone who had no soul. And I thought that was very, wow. I mean, that was, they tied it up very, very well. But that speaks to the narrative. He was actually the person who hired the person who shot that video. He was going to create his own narrative. And guess what? When he used that same video, it would not have come out like that. It would not have made him look like he thought people in Harlem and people and his fans were dirty and disgusting and he had to wash his hands. It would not have made him look like he was arguing with his attorney so vehemently. I mean, and do we know that Mark Agnifilo knew that these protected conversations were even being filmed? I don't know. But all of that comes into play. But then comes the big question, and this has been his real big fight, Mel, and that is this particular video that was shot, that 50 Cent and his executive producer. Oh, I need to learn her name, but they're saying that they got it legally. And he is saying you couldn't have got it legally. I didn't give you permission to use my name, image, and likeness in the market space like this. So what he's saying is that, all right, he hasn't said, oh, I paid him and it was mine. It seems to be a fact that he did not pay the videographer. But does that necessarily, Mel, make you think that just because you didn't pay the videographer, that now you can go use this video in whatever way you want? I doubt Sean would have signed a contract that said that. I don't even know if there was a written contract in place. Of course, if you're dealing with text, and this is just information about defamation and contracts, if you're dealing in text and you text something or email something, those little pieces, the text, the email, it can make up a contract. So it doesn't even have to be formal. But I do not think for any moment that would be like, Mel, so you're married, right?
Yes.
So that would mean like that maybe a videographer comes and shoots your wedding. You don't like the footage, so you don't pay him. That doesn't mean that he can use your name, image, and likeness for advertising and put you up in billboard. I mean, that belongs to you as a private person. So I think on that one thing, he has a very good argument. What he's not fighting, and we haven't seen yet, is that, hey, you have defamed me. Now, the defense to defamation, here are a couple of them: that it's newsworthy, that it's the truth, that it's an opinion. So there are some defenses and some arguments on both sides that once this goes to court, which it will, or maybe it will settle, but Netflix is definitely very, very aware that Sean Combs is coming for them. He is not going to let his reputation go down further. But let me say one more thing. There's another defense that might be available to Fiddy and the producer, and that is some defendants have such low reputations that their reputation can't be brought down even further. This is what they call a libel-proof plaintiff. Can't libel you. You're so disgusting, so destructive, so everything. You're so low, I can't bring you down further. And I think that that would be another argument, and that is available in the court of law, the libel-proof plaintiff. And that is something that I'm positive, I'm positive that Fiddy and his team are going to rely upon.
Can you explain to the audience how this is right up your alley with what you do?
Yeah, so defamation is something that I teach inside of the classroom, but it's also something that I work with various law firms on defamation cases where defamation intersects with journalism. And it often becomes a question, if a journalist is saying something because it's in the news and they're repeating it, does that repeating of a news piece actually make you say, libelous, saying something libelous? Well, here are a couple things that people should understand. Even if you attribute a libelous piece of information to the New York Times, it can still be libelous. You might say, according to the New York Times, Sean Combs, XYZ. That XYZ might be a lie, and you go to court and you prove it, and you say, but I didn't say it. I was really just quoting what the New York Times said. You're actually both liable. The repetition of any defamation or defamatory information is libel, just like the first time, just like the 100th time. And this is why it's very important for people to understand, especially in this world where, like I said, everybody's got a mic. And it's very, very easy to say things off the cuff. But if you don't know it to be a fact, even if you attribute it, you could still get in trouble. And that is the big thing about defamation that I don't think that people understand and they don't really care for. So that's my background. And it's one of those things that I really want people to know and understand, not just the defamation, but just learning about the law. I try to break down the law into little pieces so that people understand it. It not only makes us, better people in terms of our rights, but just as a society, how we go about moving with each other. Your rights, and you can stand up and more readily understand them. A lot of people just don't understand the law, so they don't know when they're being violated. They don't know that. Let me give you an example, and this is kind of going off the cuff. Tell me, you can cut me off, but there was a case in California where there was a woman who, and this has to do with sexual harassment, the boss was dating somebody in the office. She sued for sexual harassment. Now, we think of sexual harassment in terms of kind of somebody doing something to somebody, writing excessive emails or maybe looking at their breast too much. But she filed for sexual harassment because her boss was dating someone else and she won the case. And so that's why, someone in that position may not know they can sue for sexual harassment if your boss is dating someone in the office, because you might feel put upon in a sexual way that you also have to do that. So that's what I mean by the nuances and people understanding the law. I always say, if you feel something intrinsically and just in your gut is wrong, there's probably a lawsuit that you can carry out or file for.
Here's a question. Does saying allegedly save you in the case of defamation?
It does not. It does not. But again, you have to, it's a case by case basis. If you say allegedly and you are a journalist and you are writing an article and you are quoting an organization that is reputable, I mean, there are a lot of laws that protect journalists specifically. But if you just say, oh, allegedly, I don't want to bring up some specific cases. I know some of these people. We could, everybody from Cardi B to Nicki Minaj, they've sued for defamation and they've won. The allegedly doesn't matter. You can't just say allegedly someone has a communicable sexual sex disease. You can't just say allegedly and put that out there. If we think about, and I think we talked about this before, Kenny Lattimore and his wife, there were a lot of allegedlys there, but they were able to get all types of information taken down on their behalf by these companies. So allegedly does not save you. If you are a journalist, though, and there's some other moving parts that are in there, like, for example, let's say that the ACLU files a lawsuit against somebody and you're a reporter and you're quoting the ACL's lawsuit and you are fairly reporting on each side. There's something called the fair report privilege, where yes, you've given the facts, you haven't added any color or your opinion. You're just saying X sued Y. Here's what is in the legal documents. That's fine. But if you start going into things that aren't true or borderline or could be opinion or not, that actually could get you into trouble. Though we know, remember, Oprah Winfrey and the Texas beef cattle, when she said, I'm not going to eat another hamburger, she said that was her opinion. In that case, she did win. We do believe strongly in having our opinion, but there are some very fine lines, but the law protects our opinion also. But I always tell people it's a case by case basis.
Right. So when it comes to these magazines like Inquirer, I Want to Know, and all these, how do they survive if this is the case?
You know what? They survive because they are in a position where they can have money and insurance just in case somebody sues. But you have to understand that somebody who is in a position to sue may not want to sue. Why? Because when you sue, then you're going to get deposed. Now you have all types of other things that might come out, and you are also taking your time and money to sue. A lot of people don't want to do that. If you're an actor and you're on set for one of the biggest movies, do you want to sue a blogger? Do you want to sue an influencer who said something about you? You could, to make a point. Number one, you're going to give that person more shine and more influence by suing them, because obviously they're important enough to do that. Number two, you're going to have to, take time off of said movie set in order to go to court and deal with. Number three, you're going to have to pay some attorney between $500 to $1,000 an hour in order to deal with your case. Now, look at the president of France, right? The Macrons. They sued Candace Owens because Candace Owens has been on a rampage and hasn't stopped saying that the president, Emmanuel Macron's wife, is not a woman. What did they do? They filed a lawsuit that was over 200 pages. This was after cease and desist letters. So that you have the president of a country suing an influencer in America. So some people will take the time. Some people will go through the process. And guess what? They have a lot of money. And that normally will stop people from being a part of the legal process. The Macrons have a money. They were rich before he got into office. They're rich now. So they're taking Candace Owens, not only Candace to task, but her company. They've sued her individually. They've sued her company. So that's an example of where somebody said, you know what? I'm actually going to take the time, money, and effort. I'm going to sue this woman. And that case was not dismissed. She asked for it to be dismissed, and they said, nope, this shall proceed. So that will be interesting to see how that comes out.
Do you think there's strong potential for Sean Diddy Combs to sue Netflix?
Sean is going to sue Netflix. Sean is going to sue everybody. And he should. I'm going to start with that video. I'm also going to start with the implication. The reason why I say he should is because, one, he has the right to do so. Two, I'm not sure if that video not paying that guy meant that they could use his name, likeness, and image in the marketplace wherever they want. I mean, at this point, you might as well just put him on, t-shirts and sell them. Did he say that you could do that? It's the same difference. You're putting, let me read you a statistic here, just in terms of Sean Combs. Views, all right, in 1 week, 21.8 million people. This is just below Stranger Things. Stranger Things is an international phenomenon. So in terms of these numbers, he has a lot of people, and not just influencers, but everybody is talking about this man. His only way to come out of it is to sue for his reputation. But here's the truth about the reputation. You can't undo the wrongdoing. So he's going to sue for any future things that he thinks he has lost because of this. He's going to sue because he thinks that his reputation has been harmed. And in the process of suing for defamation, you have to show damages. You can't just sue and say, my feelings were hurt. You have to show damages. How did it hurt you financially, right? I'm certainly you lost some social currency, but if someone called you a pedophile and you drove a bus for kids and you lost your job and oops, you're not a pedophile, they're not going to hire you again at the bus company. So you go to a number, you go to an actuary, they bring them in court and they talk about how much money you actually lost. So Sean is going to do the same thing. He's going to say, this is the money that I have lost. And, you improperly cause emotional distress. He's going to throw it all in there. It's going to be a huge crock pot full of legal actions. And I would say that based upon what I saw, because there were still some questions in and about that. And we don't need to go into them, but there are a lot of questions that he could say, you know what, this just isn't the truth. This isn't the truth. And so that's going to be his biggest defense.
I'm starting to see that some of the individuals in the documentary, their stories are falling apart. So this could be troublesome.
Yeah. I haven't seen that specifically. Is there one in particular you remember?
His childhood friend, what's the guy's name? I didn't really.
Oh, yeah. Yeah. His childhood friend who lived in the split home with him. Yes.
Yeah.
I think
So
it was
he's
a
taking
Burrows.
on
Was that
fire.
Kenny Burrows?
Yeah, he's taking on fire. Quite a few people. So we'll have to see what happens.
Yeah, definitely. We're gonna have to see what happens there.
So we're approaching our last 10 minutes. So I figured we could get to Luigi Mangione. What did you think sitting in the courtroom?
I thought sitting in the courtroom was really was so interesting. People who, if you haven't gone to the courtroom, federal courts and state courts, very, very different, right, Mel? State courts slightly more relaxed.
Yeah.
So it gave me a time to speak with a lot of the young women around me. I spoke with about 5 different young women, asked them why they were there, asked them why it was important. I thought it was interesting that a lot of them didn't seem to me to be fangirls, though I did look down the aisle and there were some women who seemed to be very enthralled, just with being there and excited, wearing green, like the Mario Brothers Luigi. And then one had this doll, and it was a doll that was a part of a book that was on Goodreads that Luigi recommended. So they were all in, but to hear them speak about the death penalty and fair rights, they have hung their hats on a cause. And I thought that was interesting based upon some of the things that we've seen. A couple of them also would not want to speak on camera. So that's why we haven't seen necessarily these people talking about the anti-death penalty and, not People's Organization for Progress, but, different organizations that support the right to one's fair trial and things of that nature. And I spoke to about 5, and I know you too, who were on that particular path. And I thought that that was very interesting. And I did have to say to them, but someone died. Like, you cannot possibly think that it was right for someone to go in the middle of the streets of New York and co-sign on him shooting somebody. That's impossible. And they said, no, we don't believe that that was right. But we also know that where he is right now in this process, he does have some rights. It's a real mixed bag. But they are right that he is innocent until proven guilty. And it's always very interesting to see how a video and what's captured can be used for and against the defendant. And that's what we're seeing, just like in the Sean Combs trial, or just like in any trial where there is actual video. We always see the video in its entirety, but attorneys break it down frame by frame. And that's where the evidence lies. And that's where the evidence is lying in this case. What is going on frame by frame in that video that is for or against Luigi? And that makes it very, very different than if you're just sitting there watching him being accosted in McDonald's. And I say accosted because at the end of the day, there were 13 officers, am I right with that number, who were around him. And if I'm surrounded by 13 officers, guess what? I don't feel like I can go anywhere. You know what I mean?
Right.
And so that is an argument that his attorneys are making. And again, you have to, like, frame by frame, there's a different story than just watching the video, if you will, or the movie, if you will, all at once. So
Yes, indeed. Mark says they're probably heartbroken finding out Luigi only into trans women.
oh my goodness. Everyone, I think people are trying to draw something about a ladyboy text that he just, wrote somebody when he was in Thailand, I believe. Who knows what he is? I will say this, won't have anything to do with the trial. And I've brought that up before on other shows, speaking about Sean Combs, for example, that the lawsuits that he has had that are against him are by mostly men, the ones that are outstanding. But no one's really talking about him being a gay man necessarily. And really, it has no place. I mean, it's like that's not what the core issue of what the case is about. And neither is it inside of Luigi's case.
Brian Cantrell says never will understand why, but even Charles Manson had women love him.
Yeah, there is this natural desire for people who are lonely in the world to identify with other people who are lonely in the world. And when you're behind bars, like a Charles Manson, you have a captive audience. And so, as we know, Luigi has a captive audience too. He's gotten like 7,000 letters so far. But people tend to, how many proposals have the Menendez brothers got? Many, many, many. Ted Bundy, all right, killed women. Many, many women admired him and wanted to be with him. I think it's the way that we kind of bring up people to think about their ideals of having a relationship. And if you're someone who hasn't found any connections on the outside world, someone who's behind bars, who's got your captive attention, because, they might be desperate for a letter, it seems like a natural fit. So I can understand the explanations that I've heard in terms of the psychology of reaching out to someone. And we know too, look at the studies that are out there, the number of people, especially young men, that are just lonely overall, that are just lonely. So there's a natural connection to get to that captive audience behind bars. If you send a letter to Ted Kaczynski, or if you did, right, he's no longer here, but he probably read it. And that's a connection that people like, even if they're free on the outside world.
So this is a suppression hearing. Do you think it's possible that the gun, some of these key ingredients will be suppressed?
Yeah, that is such a good question. And that's why we're at these hearings. And that's why it's taking so long, because we have to figure out whether or not his Miranda rights were properly read, and whether or not he indeed needed a search warrant. He, meaning the officer or officers, needed a search warrant to go in the bag and get that gun. The Miranda rights have to deal specifically with what he said, and then a search warrant has to deal specifically with what was found in the bag. Some interesting things found in the bag, from international money to the gun, to to notes, things of that nature. So I think it could go either way. I really do. But the police officers, so far, some of the things that they have said have just not seemed to be credible. And I'm not saying that they're not, I'm just saying what they seem to be. Because remember, when someone goes on a witness stand, there's a song and dance that the attorneys do in order to discredit the witness, right? And so that's why I say seem to be, because that's the goal of the attorney, to make them to seem like they're not credible, what they call impeaching the witness, right? It's like, they have nothing to say, they seem like a liar. So, but it seems that game that has been played, Karen has won, right? Karen Agnifilo, with some of these police officers. So it really depends. It really depends upon what this judge says and the discretion that he has. And discretion is used all the way from the indictment all the way to when someone is sentenced. Judges have discretion. So it depends upon what the discretion is, as well as precedent cases that both sides are arguing for. It could go either way. Now, if everything is suppressed in that bag, which is a lot, like that's more than connecting the dots. That is the glue. That is like a bag of Elmer's glue, right? Or Gorilla Glue. I mean, it is tight. But even if that is gone, I mean, you still have the video. You still have his DNA. You still have so many other things. You have conversations that he had with people abroad where he mentioned the CEO of United Healthcare. It's not to say that he's going to get off at all, but it's not a win for the prosecution at all if that evidence goes away.
Speaking of lying, do you think it really hurts the prosecutor that the officers have lied so much?
Yeah, and again, I'll say they appeared to lie, and there were some lies in which they were caught. Because I want to make sure, because people who aren't there, it's like you say something and then people misunderstand it. But what was your question? Because now I went all the way off. What was your question?
In this particular case, the
Yeah.
main officer and the second officer, in fact, the second officer said, well, when he went through training in Indiana, they were taught that they could lie or create a ruse for the defendant. So they did admit to lying to
Yes.
Luigi Mangione.
Yeah, they did. And if they can point to that evidence, I mean, listen, Derek Chauvin said the same thing. Hey, we were trained to do this and we were trained to hold people down like we did George Floyd, and it didn't matter. So there's one thing with training. There's also one thing about the practical application of what you were doing. And if they were trained recently, that's one thing, but if they were trained 3 years ago and things have changed, that's another thing. So you really have to look into the details. Even with the training, here's the question. Police officers cannot start asking you questions that might seem like they are interrogation questions or questions that might lead you into a path of specifics about admission or being part of whatever they are trying to find without giving you your Miranda rights. So the line of questioning that they started to give seemed as if they were going down that route. On the other hand, he lied about his identity. So if that's the case, well, that kind of, ruffled their feathers, put them on notice. He's lying about this and he's not saying who he really was. Now that we've caught him in a lie, now we can, continue our questioning. The problem is those Miranda rights are very important. He didn't have to say anything. You have a right to remain silent. If they told him that too far into this questioning, well, then none of that can be used. And so that's going to be, again, up to the judge, up to precedent to determine how this case comes out.
Okay, so what happens if these major items are suppressed? Is it game over?
No, not game over at all. A lot, the game will go on, and then we still have to see who the winner is because there's so much, there's so many other ways that both sides could argue. I'm not saying it's over for the prosecution or the defense, but just because a few items have been removed, you have so much other evidence that is against him that it won't really make a difference. This particular process will go on.
Okay, so we have reached our time. Are you looking forward to going back to court?
Yeah, I am looking forward going back to court. I'm looking forward to not long lines and it not being cold. I wish court was today because today was a mild day here in New Jersey. I understand New York had some snow.
Yeah, we had quite a bit of snow today.
Really? Like in
It
inches?
didn't accumulate, but it was coming down heavy.
Okay. Yeah. Yeah. And I just want to make sure that people know, please follow me on my YouTube. I will begin talking about different things that have to do with the law and very little snippets because again, I want to teach people the law and the process at Candace Kelley TV, CANDACE. Well, it's right on the screen. Follow me at Candace Kelley TV on YouTube. But yeah, I look forward to going back to court and I'm looking forward to some good weather.
Awesome. Me too. Would you
Yeah.
like to close out with some words from the law professor?
I will say it seems like the theme tonight that really kind of, emerged was defamation. Be careful what you say. Be careful what you write. You might think, but it's just little on me. I'm not even a journalist. Once you put yourself out there, it could happen in an email. You can defame someone. It could happen. You can write a note to someone. You can defame someone. And certainly, if you're an influencer, or if you say something that's off the cuff and you think that's really cute, it can defame someone. So be careful of what you say and be careful that it is the truth or, it's something that is newsworthy that you can back up with some truth. Don't be reckless about it.
It's always a pleasure to have you here, and I look forward to seeing you in court.
All
Thank
right.
you.
Indeed. We'll see you then.
Take care.
Different voices, but the same song. Loving a world where we all belong. Kindness leading the way, breaking the chains. In the symphony of love, the thing remains. Embracing diversity, brighter days in sight. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. Colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might. Watching the world sharing love and light. Hearts beating as one in our peaceful flight. The colors of harmony, painting the night. United we stand in love's pure might.